Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome again to the poem of the day for today, Friday, September the 5th, 2025. This is unfortunately the second time this has happened to me, that this is the second time I'm recording this video. The first time, as it was transcribing or buffering or whatever, I got a something went wrong and it was gone again message, which on the one hand is a bit frustrating, but on the other is a gift in disguise because it allows me to revisit and reread this poem again. And in doing so, I anticipate that new and different things will surface and will come to my attention, which is, I think, the great gift and joy and pleasure of reading poetry and rereading poetry. I'm coming to you a little bit later today. Last night was a late night at school, and then this morning I was not really able to get the video out before I went back to work. And so I'm getting it in here in the last few hours of the day so that we don't miss our streak. And because, again, this is just a very special poem. And I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. So this poem is by Ruth Awad, who is a Lebanese-American poet currently living in Columbus, Ohio. And in 2021, she was the National Endowment of the Arts Poetry Fellow. And I will speak about this poem afterward, but I'm also going to link a interview with her that I read, which speaks a lot to what she was going through personally and what she was thinking about as she was conceiving and composing this poem. And while I don't think that normally the poet's intention or any writer's intention is the most important thing or the end-all be-all in interpreting and understanding a work, I think that this interview in particular, and for this poet and poem in particular, understanding what was going on with her personally, but also what was going on within the broader sort of social and global context at the time, in the way that she was thinking about it and writing about it, is something that's very helpful to illuminating the strong feeling behind the poem. Regardless, if you don't read the interview, there's still tremendous feeling and affirmation in this poem. And so let's get to it. This is Reasons to Live by Ruth Awad. Because if you can survive the violet night, you can survive the next. And the fig tree will ache with sweetness for you in sunlight that arrives first at your window, quietly pawing even when you can't stand it. And you'll heavy the winding floorboards of the house you filled with animals, as hurt and lost as you. And the bearded irises will form fully in their roots, their golden manes swaying with the want of spring. Live, 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 live. One day you'll put your hands in the earth and understand an afterlife isn't promised. But the spray of scorpion grass keeps growing, and the dogs will sing their whole bodies in praise of you. And the redbuds will lay down their pink crowns, and the rivers will set their stones and ribbons at your door, if only you'll let the world soften you with its touching. I'm very glad I got to read this poem again, because I felt it more deeply reading it this time than in the first iteration of the video. And not to make this about me, but I also feel like I read it better. I felt it and read it more emotively and more smoothly than I did the first time. But you'll just have to believe me on that. This entire poem is one sentence. And in a sense, it's one incomplete sentence, because it's basically a subordinate clause. The poem begins with because, which is something that we teach student writers not to do. But Ruth Awad's use of that in this poem, I think, is pertinent and urgent, because beginning with because suggests that what we're reading and what we're hearing is contingent upon something else. It's a response to a question. Why should I keep going on living? Answer, because. Likewise, sentences that begin with because, or clauses that begin with because, are dependent upon something else to complete them. So there's an acknowledgement of an incompleteness, but there's a promise of something coming in the future to make this dependent thing whole. And I think just from a grammatical standpoint, that's a beautiful move. It's also one entire sentence, so it's an entire unit, it's an entire thought or an entire breath all at once. That lends a temporal quality to this poem that is immediate and contained, but also expanded beyond one breath or one stanza. Each of these stanzas are short and 2 lines long. There's not a rhyme scheme to it per se, but the first 2 lines end with survive, and the 4th line ends with arrives. So there's a bit of a forced or a slant rhyme there. And yet beginning those 2 first lines with survive, the repetition of survive, both reinforces the strength and the importance of that direction, as well as revealing 2 meanings to it. To survive, which is to merely continue living as a biological fact, but also to survive in a way that means you've endured something meaningfully and you're choosing to continue in your life, deciding that it is worth doing. There's an undercurrent of such sadness in this poem that almost suggests that it's talking someone or talking oneself out of a suicide. Whether that suicide is something that's literal or whether that suicide is something that is spiritual. I'm going to continue living, but I'm essentially going to give up on the inside. And so this poem is an incredibly, I think, strong and beautiful affirmation of one person to themselves, but also to the rest of us as a secondary audience, and really to the natural world, of what sort of beautiful things are there in support of you when you find yourself in these moments of absolute desolation and despair. I noticed as I was reading that the word is violet night, but it does sound a lot like violent night, and it's almost impossible not to, as you're reading it, almost lend that in there to change that word. And so there's a sense of injury and urgency and danger at the beginning of it. Throughout the rest of the poem, a lot of the aspects of nature that are named are also personified and given human action. The fig tree aches, the sunlight claw or paws at the window. You can almost see it like fingers of the sunlight, like a child's drawing, pawing at the window. We hear the bearded irises swaying and almost saying to the poet, live, 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 live. So all of the operations of nature that seem ordinary to us and to seem basic, the things that they do to fulfill their ends, are all things that are calling upon us as a part of nature to continue living and to participate in this vast and beautiful dance. Because about halfway through the poem, the poet talks about rooting one's hands into the ground, which is something that, from a meditation standpoint, involves literally rooting or grounding oneself, but also literally kind of morphing oneself with the terrain, with the earth, with the dust that we are and will become again. And that's the moment at which the poet talks about realizing, understanding that the afterlife isn't promised. And so again, I think this serves as a reason not to physically die, is that you might be annihilated. You might cease to exist in any form. But it's also an affirming call to live meaningfully within the life before death, instead of waiting in anticipation or worry for whatever comes after. That's something beyond your control and beyond your ability to fully know or understand. And so that makes the eminence of things that we are certain about having right now all the more important and all the more precious. And as a result, the reason for living that the speaker finds is the assurance that all of nature, in this really sort of Whitman-esque way, sings around you, affirming you. In the very next stanza, we hear that the dogs will sing their whole bodies in praise of you. And I thought a lot of Song with Myself right there. mixing there that, dogs bark and there can be kind of a harshness or a loudness to the bark, but here it's a singing, and it's the whole body of the dog, as though its very existence is something that is so tied up in our own existence and thriving that we're all just kind of one with nature. To take oneself out of it by giving up or by self harm is also to be pulling something out of nature that it too is going to miss. All of the aspects of nature in here, the redbuds lying down their pink crowns, the rivers setting their stones and ribbons, are things that are trying to order themselves around the balance going on within this person. And I just find that to be incredibly beautiful, that nature will miss you when you're gone, and that itself alone, a recognition that you're a part of some greater thing, some dynamic system or larger body. And so to do harm to yourself is to do harm to the rest of that. I find just a beautiful acknowledgement. And so the poem ends with this promise that all of this happens if only you'll let the world soften you with its touching, as though to say, these things are around you, calling out to you, yearning for you, longing for you all the time. And all you need to do is to take a moment, root your hands into the grass, listen to the swaying of the flowers that are there, allowing the dogs to sing to you with their whole bodies. And you sort of can't help but see this reason for living that Awad is talking about. It's a gorgeous poem. It's a very moving poem. And I hope it spoke to you in some of the ways that it touched me and spoke to me. And with this poem, but also with this weekend, I hope these things bring you a profound peace.